Hello everyone, I am back. It's been a while since I have sent you guys a video, but since we are getting into fractions for Unit 6, there are a lot of different strategies in solving fractions, so I just wanted to make sure that you guys were exposed to what your children were doing in class. For the next week and week and a half, we're going to be focusing on equivalent fractions and also focusing on taking a fraction and reducing that fraction to its lowest term or simplest form. So you can see with the fraction bars, I have shown an example of 2/4. Here in the yellow, 1/4 plus 1/4 is 2/4. So I have only added my numerator. I've kept my denominator the same since I've not changed the whole. These 2/4 are equivalent to 4/8. And that makes sense because we know that 1/4 is bigger than just 1/8. So it would take more 1/8 to equal the same amount as my 2/4. Another example would be if I had 2/5. We know that 1/5 is larger than 1/10. So if I were to show equivalency of 2/5, it would take 4/10 in order to be equivalent to 2/5. One way that we show our students how to find equivalent fractions is by multiplying. Essentially, that's what I did with these two examples here. So to kind of show you on paper, students can either multiply or divide the numerator and denominator by the same number to find an equivalent fraction. So again, there's 2/4. I times it by 2 to get my 4. 4 times 2, I get my 8. So in the example I just showed you, 2/4 is the same as 4/8. I could also show an equivalent fraction by dividing. If I take 2/4 and I divided it by 2, my numerator and my denominator, I could get 1/2. Another example of multiplying and dividing, if I wanted to show an equivalent fraction of 3/9, I could multiply it by 3 on the numerator and denominator and get 9/27. 3/9, I could do it by 2 if I wanted to, get 6/18. And then in this case here, 3/9, if I wanted to divide by 3, I could get 1/3. So kids will practice finding equivalent fractions this week, and they will know to be able to multiply or divide to be able to find equivalent fractions. They will be using fraction bars just so that they can get a visual of what they're actually doing. Another focus this week is going to be finding simplest form or reducing the fraction, because on the end of grade test, a lot of times they will have the answer in its reduced or lowest term. So there's several ways that we can teach students how to find their lowest term or the reduced fraction. Simplest form or the reduced fraction is still an equivalent fraction. So for example, I always teach the kids the first thing you should try, if you had 5/10 as your fraction, you're trying to find its lowest term, simplest form, always check to see if your numerator can divide evenly into your denominator. Because if it can, it automatically will give you the simplest form or its lowest term. This example for 7/14, 7 can easily go into 14 2 times. So 7 divided by 7 is 1, 14 divided by 7 is 2. 3/9, 3 can easily go into 9 3 times. So 5/10 and a half, even though this is its simplest form, lowest term, they're still equivalent fractions. I divided to find it. Same thing with 7/4 and 1/2. They're equivalent fractions. Same thing with 3/9 and 1/3. They're also equivalent fractions. So this is one way to reduce a fraction. Always check first to see if the numerator can divide evenly into the denominator. If it cannot, you will then have to find that greatest common factor. For example, 10/12. 10 cannot evenly divide into 12. So I have to find the factors of 10 and the factors of 12. My factors of 10 are 1, 2, 5, and 10. And again, how did I get that? 1 times 10 gave me my 10, 2 times 5 gave me my 10. Then I find the factors of 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12, because 1 times 12 is 12, 2 times 6 is 12, 3 times 4 is 12. The greatest common factor that these two numbers have happens to be 2. So that is the number I use to divide by. So 10 divided by 2 is 5. 12 divided by 2 is 6. Therefore, 10/12 reduced is 5/6. These are also equivalent fractions. Another example would be 12/27. 12 cannot go into 27, so I have to find that greatest common factor. Factors of 12 are as follows. Factors of 27, and the greatest common that they have with each other are 3. So again, I would divide by 3. 12 divided by 3 is 4. 27 divided by 3 is 9. Therefore, 12/27 in its lowest term, reduced fraction, is 4/9. They are also equivalent fractions. Okay. A lot of times your greatest common factor could be a 2, could be a 3, sometimes even a 6. So we have the kids make sure that it's the greatest, because if they don't find the greatest and they just happen to find a common factor and they divide it, they might realize that you actually could have reduced the fraction again. So hence the name the greatest common, because there are examples where you're going to have more than one factor that's in common, but you want to find the greatest common factor. Next question here for you guys is, how would you know that 9/27 and 6/18 are equivalent to each other? Okay, so in this case here, you might look at these two and recognize that they don't really seem to be equivalent to each other. They don't look to be equivalent, because if you multiply to try to get 9, you can't. 18 to try to get 27, you can't. If you try to divide, you can't. So how would we know? Well, if you're able to reduce 9/27 and you're able to reduce 6/18 to the same fraction, okay, then they are also considered to be equivalent. So again, 9 can go into 27 9 times, so it's 1/3. 6 can go into 18 6 times, so it's 1/3. So even though these two fractions don't necessarily fit that rule of being able to multiply to find it, or when you divide it, you'd have to find the simplest form or the reduced fraction to determine if these are actually equivalent fractions. So it's going to be really important that the students know how to reduce, and reduce, because again, a lot of times on the end of grade test, it's going to ask the student to find the answer, and then it could possibly be in reduced form. So we're going to be focusing a lot on equivalency this week. So again, how can you find equivalent fractions? You can multiply or you can divide by the same number. Simplest form, you're constantly dividing to try to find that equivalent fraction in that reduced form by either seeing if that numerator can be the dividing number, or if not, moving into finding that greatest common factor to be the dividing number. I hope this has been very helpful, and there'll be more videos coming soon. Thanks so much.